Welcome to Bluebook video number 11 on case names and statutes in citations versus text. In this video, we are going to examine citation sentences and clauses as well as textual references to legal authority. We will also cover the differences between case name abbreviations in citation sentences versus text. Finally, we will also discuss the rules governing using statutes in citation versus textual sentences. Showing you the differences is best illustrated through lots of examples. First, let's be clear about our terms. A citation sentence is what we typically think when we think of legal citation. It's the most common and preferred method of placing a citation in the text of a document. It's placed at the end of a sentence and cites to an authority that relates to the entire preceding sentence. It begins with a capital letter and ends with a period. A citation clause is most often used when the citation supports only part of the sentence. To avoid confusion, you could set off the citation with commas to make clear which part of the sentence the citation supports. It immediately follows the part of the sentence to which it relates. Characteristics of a citation clause are that it is set off by commas rather than a period, it is not capitalized unless it starts with a word that would otherwise be capitalized, and it does not end with a period unless it is the last clause in the sentence or the period is part of the citation itself, like id. Finally, the bulk of your legal writing is made up of sentences you write about the law and its application to the issue you're addressing. The sentences you write are referred to as textual sentences. Sometimes it is necessary to refer to a legal authority in the textual sentence itself. In these instances, the references to the legal authority is an integral part of the sentence instead of a citation that accompanies the sentence. Let's look at some examples on our next slide. In this example, all of the information in the sentence comes from Romer versus Evans, so a citation sentence at the end of the sentence is appropriate. In this example of a sentence using citation clauses, notice that the first part of the sentence comes from Smith versus Pierce. The Smith versus Pierce citation is set off by commas. Also notice that it is capitalized because we would capitalize Smith no matter what. Finally, notice that there is no period at the end of the citation. The second half of the sentence comes from a different case, Myers versus Shawarma. Note that Myers is set off from the text by a comma. This is because it's a citation clause, even though it's at the end of the sentence. Myers supports only the second half of the sentence. Also note that the Myers citation clause ends with a period here because it's the last clause in the sentence. In this example, if you were reading the sentence out loud, you wouldn't read the citation as part of the sentence. It's not part of the text. Rather, it's part of the legal citations to the authorities you are relying on in your sentence. Sometimes citation clauses can result in awkward sentence construction. Consider if there are other ways to word the sentence that would be easier to understand before deciding that a citation clause is the only option. For example, is it possible to split the sentence into two sentences? Finally, let's look at an example of a textual reference. In this sentence, the reader is referring to the case Romer versus Evans in the text of the sentence. Therefore, we call this a textual reference. The writer will also need to include the citation at the end of the sentence. Textual references are embedded into sentences and are not set off by commas like a citation clause would be. Notice that if you took Romer versus Evans from the sentence, it would no longer make sense as a sentence. That means that the use of Romer versus Evans here is an integral part of the meaning of the sentence and not just a citation to the authority relied on in the sentence. This video addresses the rules that apply to the format you should use when you refer to a legal authority in the textual sentence itself. Let's look at another example of a regular citation sentence versus a textual sentence. In the citation sentence, it reads, "Plaintiff sued defendant for intentional infliction of emotional distress." And then you have your citation sentence to Rupel versus Brooks. Note that the regular citation sentence always ends in a period because the citation in and of itself is treated as a sentence. A textual sentence is a citation that is embedded into a sentence. For example, let's look at this example where the writer has already provided a citation to Rupel earlier in his document. In Rupel versus Brooks, the court found sufficient evidence to affirm the verdict for the plaintiff because the plaintiff was terrified, underwent spells of vomiting, and suffered from headaches. Notice here that this reference to Rupel versus Brooks is embedded inside the textual sentence. Also notice that the writer would need to provide a citation to the information it is citing from Rupel by using a citation sentence after the textual sentence. Because Rupel was cited in full earlier in the document, a short form is appropriate in this citation sentence. In an earlier video, we talked about the Bluebook rules for abbreviations and case names. Let's refresh on that information. Now, the main case name abbreviation rules and general guidelines that you will use most are found in Table 10 and Table 6. Table 6 provides you with lots of abbreviations listed in alphabetical order. Note that unless otherwise indicated by Table 6, plurals are formed by adding the letter S. Table 10 deals with geographical terms. For instance, South Dakota's abbreviation is S.D. The rules, however, differ somewhat if you are referring to a case in a textual sentence rather than using it in a citation clause or sentence. Now let's look at some concrete examples starting with rules for citation sentences. Specifically in just citation sentences, you want to abbreviate every word in Table 6. I've listed some examples for your reference. Note that employees is plural, so I added an S at the end, making the abbreviation EMPS period. Note that even though systems is plural, the abbreviation information in Table 6 explicitly tells us that even plural forms of the word system should be abbreviated SYS period. In citation sentences, you also want to abbreviate every word in Table 10. This is only if the geographical term is not the whole party name. For example, SD Farm Bureau versus Mitchell, South Dakota, per Table 10, is abbreviated S.D. Finally, you must abbreviate the first word in the party name in citation sentences if the abbreviation is required by the rules above. Now let's look at textual sentences. Rule 10.2.1 sub C in your Bluebook states that you must abbreviate only widely known acronyms and these 8 words. In textual sentences, you do not abbreviate one of the 8 words listed above if it is the first word in the party name. For example, Association of Benefit Plans versus Harms. Now let's look at some side-by-side examples on how abbreviations can differ between citation and textual sentences. First example, Association of Automobile Manufacturers versus Smith involves 3 abbreviations for citation sentences. Note that in a textual sentence, however, none of these 3 are abbreviated. Association is one of the 8 words that would normally be abbreviated, but because it starts the party's name, it's written out in full. The second example, South Dakota Chemical versus Thompson, South Dakota is abbreviated in the citation sentence per Table 10 as SD, and Chemical is abbreviated per Table 6 as Chem period. In the textual sentence, however, both South Dakota and Chemical are spelled out in full. Take a look at the third example, Incorporated Financial versus Cunningham. Incorporated and Financial are both abbreviated for the citation, but neither is abbreviated in a textual sentence. Note again, that is because Incorporated starts the party name and is spelled out in full. Finally, look at the last example. Uniform, University, Trustee, Communication, Coalition, Corporation versus John Hopkins University Press Limited. In the citation sentence, there are 8 abbreviations for this case. The textual sentence, however, only has 2 abbreviations, corporation and limited. This is because they are 2 of the 8 widely used abbreviations, and they do not start the party's name. With respect to statutes, Bluebook Rule 6.2 sub C provides that you should write out the word section when referring to a statute in text rather than using the section symbol. For example, in this sentence, with a reference to section 692A.103 of the Iowa Code, notice that the word section is written out instead of using a section symbol. The exception to this general rule is set out in Rule 12.10 and includes textual references to the U.S. Code, which do not require you to write out the word section. So, in this example, where the writer is referring to 42 U.S.C. Section 1983, in this textual sentence, the Bluebook allows use of the section symbol. Notice, though, that if the reference to the U.S. Code started the sentence, like here, Rule 6.2 sub C requires that the word section be spelled out. This is because the first word of any textual sentence must be spelled out. For more rules about citation sentences and citation clauses, consult the Core Grammar for Lawyers lesson E.4. This concludes Bluebook video number 11.